All right. Well, it is 12 o'clock on the dot. We still have quite a few people joining. It's going to be a great meeting. We have many people that are joining live. And then, as always, we have many that register and that watch it later on our recorded YouTube. So we appreciate you all so much for joining us today. And again, I thanked Sarah and Laura for being here with us today and giving a great presentation on working people with disabilities. And so I'm going to take a few minutes just to introduce them, and I'm going to let them take it away. My name is Dustin Goodwin. I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Manager here at the ARC of Florida, and it's my pleasure to host our meeting today. So this session is going to explain the ins and outs of the Working People with Disabilities Program. So we're going to learn about the history and requirements of the program, policy changes or policy challenges, and advocacy efforts that shaped its development and recent codification. We're going to hear and share personal stories, gain insight into current gaps into the law, and explore for future improvements to better support these individuals with disabilities in the workforce. So Sarah Goldman is the Director of Public Policy and Youth Initiatives at Florida Independent Living Council. And before the FILC in 2020, she worked as a legislative aide for 4 years in the Florida Legislature. Sarah has been recognized for her achievements as an advocate for community integration, inclusion, and employment initiatives for those with disabilities. She received her Bachelor of Social Work degree from the University of Central Florida and furthered her education by earning a master's in social work from Florida State University. Then we also have Laura Lee Minatello, and hopefully I
You
pronounced
did.
that correctly. Okay, good.
Yes.
She is the Senior Public Policy Analyst at Disability Rights Florida, the state's federally designated protection and advocacy agency, which provides free legal and advocacy services for those with disabilities. In addition to working on Disability Rights Florida's broader policy agenda, Laura began her career at Disability Rights Florida as the agency's voting access advocate, and she oversaw their voting work, helping to protect the right to private and independent access to the ballot box for Floridians with disabilities. Laura has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Central Florida and is working toward a master's in nonprofit management, also from UCF. Ladies, it's a pleasure to have both of you present for us today, and I'm going to let you take it away. If you need anything, you just let me know.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks,
Dustin.
Dustin.
Really excited to be here with you all and with Sarah to present about working people with disabilities and to kind of share our personal stories, as Dustin said. And before we jump in, we are going to go through today's agenda and just kind of give you an overview of what we will be covering today. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So feel free to think of your questions. We're really excited to interact with you all and answer those. Before we jump in, our agenda is going to cover, first of all, what Working Peoples with Disabilities is and how the program came to be. Then we're going to go into sort of the original language that was passed in Proviso in 2019, recent codification in this past session in 2026, and future legislative advocacy and kind of what we envision is needed based on some of what we've seen in the past through Working Peoples and also other states that have similar programs. So, what is Working Peoples with Disabilities? Working Peoples is a program that allows the employed recipients of Medicaid waivers. So, that is anything from the iBudget and CDC Plus to the recent pilot program, the long term care waiver, anything that falls under a Medicaid waiver program. Employed individuals can earn and save more than traditional recipients. The program was originally authorized in 2019 through Proviso, which is specialized language that essentially directs where the legislature directs the implementation of certain programs, but it's not full codification, so it wasn't actually in state statute, it wasn't law, it was just authorized through this special language that is often found in bills. And so after the legislature directed that in 2019, there was need to get federal approval that was uh, authorized in 2020. And so after that, the program took effect. And um, because of COVID, some of what we saw, we didn't actually start to see the program fully implemented until 2023. As far as administration, the Agency for Healthcare Administration, or ACA, which is Florida's, every state has an agency for healthcare administration or similar, but ACA is Florida's administration, administers the waivers, but eligibility for the waivers is determined by the Department of Children and Families, and DCF also administers eligibility for the Working People's Program. And many of those that are on the waiver programs and therefore eligible for working peoples with disabilities are served by APD, but not all. So those on the iBudget or things like the pilot program are also APD recipients, but certain waivers, like the long-term care waiver, may be served by different organizations that are outside of APD.
Okay, thanks, Laura. So I'm going to go into why working people with disabilities is important. We know that people with disabilities want to be able to have careers. They want to be able to live independently. Laura and I both, as people with physical disabilities, want to live outside of the boxes that people have put us in our whole lives. And so this program really allows individuals with disabilities to make more money and have careers, essentially. And while both of us do have insurance through our employers, the marketplace insurance does not cover personal care or other waiver services. So any types of physical therapy, speech therapy often are not covered by your typical Blue Cross Blue Shield once you become an adult. And so while it's great that we have insurance, I think my insurance alone only gives like roughly like 30 shower visits a year, which is not enough to let somebody only have about 2 showers a month. So it's great that with our waiver services, we are able to get the personal care that we need and also still be able to go to work and have that independent life. Next slide. So how did working people come to be? There was a group of self-advocates, and specifically the Florida Developmental Disabilities Council. We had been working on trying to advocate for Medicaid buy-in for many, many years. And it was something where we were educating legislators about wanting to be able to work independently. And the more that we shared our stories, the more that they realized that there was a need for this program. And Laura and I are each going to share kind of our personal stories and how this program has impacted us. But for me specifically, when I was graduating from Florida State with my master's, knew that I wanted to work full time and was told by work incentive planners that I should just work part time, that I should apply for Section 8 housing, just all of the things, again, that we have lived our whole lives being put into boxes. And so to live outside of the boxes that people have put us in, I was like, there has to be something. And so working with other advocates, we actually found out that 45 states had some type of working program for individuals with disabilities to keep their Medicaid waiver services while working, and Florida was not one of them. And so through my work in the legislature, as well as a whole coalition of us advocates, we were able to start beginning this process of how do we actually fix this and how do we actually implement getting a program here in Florida. And a lot of this was done by educating legislators. We had to tell them that our insurances did not cover the waiver services that we needed. We had to tell them that it's a tax actually benefit, a cost benefit analysis to pay for us to have in-home services rather than putting us in institutional care that costs 3 times more money. And when you're speaking to like a traditional, conservative legislature, They want to hear the cost benefit. They want to hear how you're going to save the state money and also how people can contribute to the workforce and be able to pay taxes. So that was kind of the angle as advocates that we had to use for them, the light bulbs to kind of go off to do something with this. They also saw that it was really hard for us to have a livable wage and keep our needed services. So the first thing they did, which this is pretty typical of the legislature, is that they will typically do a study. And this, like, as Laura mentioned, is really just ways to recommend things to potentially then go into law. And so it took 2 years. We tried in 2017. It did not go through, but in 2018, we were able to get a study commissioned. And Laura, if you go to the next slide, I can actually show a picture of it. This was a report from the Agency for Healthcare Administration. It was released November 30th of 2018, and it was recommendations to the Florida Legislature. And so there was a couple things that ACA came back with. One was that we had a buy-in program where we would pay a premium, like an insurance premium, to be able to keep our services. And then the other was to institute sort of like a sliding scale where, again, you would pay into your services based on what you earned. And then the last recommendation was just to implement the federal poverty limit extension up to a higher level, the asset limit, and then also keep your retirement, so 401k. And they actually opted for the last one, which surprised a lot of us advocates because we were more than happy to pay premiums to be able to keep our Medicaid services. But what ACA came back with was the fact that it would actually be an administrative cost to them because they would have to hire individuals to be able to collect our premiums. And so their recommendation to the legislature was actually to just increase the federal poverty limit, the asset limit, and allow retirement accounts. Laura, if you want to go back to the last slide.
Okay.
There you go. So that happened late 2018, and then in legislative session of 2019, we were able to work with the budget chairs. We didn't want to create a bill because we knew that that was a lot more of a tedious process to get through. And several different legislators suggested actually putting language in the budget as what Laura mentioned is proviso. And so on both sides, we were able to get the language in 2019, which is, again, just said that we could earn up to 550% of the federal poverty limit. And Laura will explain this on the next slide. Have up to $13,000 in savings as an individual, and then have a retirement account without that impacting your benefits. And that took effect on April 2nd of 2020.
So we're gonna go over the kind of original, more in depth of to the original program as Sarah started to do, and just for for me personally, Sarah and I are about the same age, but I also faced that kind of coming out of college, like not able to work, but didn't even really think that this was an option. I mean, it wasn't at a time the option. I didn't know anything about buy-in in other states, and I did for a long time work part-time, just kind of stayed under the limits that I needed to. And that's one of the reasons for me why I didn't start my master's for a long time, because it was like, what was the point? So really, when this program came along, a lot of us that hadn't been as involved in the original codification were so excited. I know that for me, it's been life-changing. But the, you know, as we've kind of gone along, we'll talk about the original program as it existed, and that Sarah and I and others were kind of originally enrolled onto, and then some in later slides the problems. But even the original program itself has been really life-changing, and so I'm just excited to get a chance. I'm always excited to get a chance to talk about this. But as it was written into proviso, the as Sarah said, the income limit, the earned income limit, so that income earned from employment specifically, was 550 or is still 550% of the federal poverty limit, which is determined by SSI limits. So every year, the federal government comes up with the federal poverty limit, which increases slightly every year. And then based on that, you can take 550% of that and you would get the limit for this program. It also increased the savings limit. So on traditional Medicaid, the savings limit is $2,000, which is not for a lot of us very helpful. That's not livable. So there is a $13,000 savings limit for an individual, or $24,000 for a couple. And I think it's important to mention though that $24,000 for a couple, both that kind of is predicated upon both of those individuals being disabled. So we found that that can be one limitation for folks that are in inter-amoral relationships. But neither here nor there, the savings limits are a lot higher. You can also have a retirement account that is not countable income until and if you draw on it. So for me, I don't know how yours work, Sarah, but for me, I have a retirement account through what DRF offers, and so that is not any money that is in that is not accountable. But if I were to leave DRF or to draw on that, that would become income. And so I don't know, Sarah, if you have a retirement account or not, but yeah. And so that is one benefit, though, the ability to plan for retirement. Also, excess wages, so those above the 550% limit, can be placed in a qualified income or a pooled trust. So for those of us that make above that 550%, what we do is we are able to put the excess money that we earn in any month. There are monthly limits, which we'll see on the next slide. So anything above that can go into the trust, and that is also not counted. And then, so lastly, in the original program, anyone put onto a waiver after the rule change in 2020, was the enrollment was automatic. For anyone previously on a waiver, like Sarah and I, we had to ask to be put onto the program, which we will kind of discuss a little bit about how that process worked as well.
Laura, can I chime in really quick?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the qualified income trusts and the pooled trusts, there's often a misunderstanding of you're going to put in all this money. I think with qualified income trusts specifically, Medicaid does have access to that money when you pass away. And there's very limited things that you can use your qualified income trust for. But Laura, I think you and I both have guardian trusts,
Yeah.
and those are a little bit different. They're incredible. I highly recommend a guardian pooled trust. They allow you to use any of the money on any expense, I think, except for food, shelter, and clothing. So basically, what SSI would deem as things that you would spend your SSI on. So it's able to help pay for gas to go to work, car insurance, if you have cable, monthly bills that have to be paid, travel expenses. So it's not just disability specific. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to earn above that income limit. Working people with disabilities are not, because they don't want to give Medicaid access to their money for a lifetime. And I always like to tell people that there is another option out there. So if people need resources, we can drop in the chat a link to the Guardian Trust.
Yeah. And I'll just chime in there too. There may have been a change there, because they did allow me recently to use some of it on clothing.
Oh, good.
So I know that, like you said, the food and the shelter, yeah, that is a issue. I also know that the other thing that I personally, and obviously you'll want to talk to an attorney if needed, but just from personal experience, if there are any kind of like I had a small Social Security overpayment that is not allowable just out of the trust funds, but pretty much anything else, as Sarah said, for the benefit of the individual. So that's another key aspect in terms of you can't pay for like gifts or things for other people, but anything for yourself. Yeah, it is a lot less restrictive than the qualified income trust. So yeah, I agree, Sarah. Let's put a resource in the chat for that and encourage that folks look into that. And I don't know when you did it, Sarah, but they were able to also get me in touch with an attorney to just check things out. So folks there can they'll understand what working people, like if you were to mention working people in your specific situation, they'll have the knowledge to tell you that like what specifically what if it would work for you. But for Sarah and I, it's been great.
I'm going to put a link in the chat right now.
Absolutely. That was a great, thanks for chiming in. But this is just a simple chart with the income limits for 2026. So these will come out typically. You'll see it says this came out in April actually. So this month, this will come out after the federal limits are changed. So you'll see this one right here is the working persons with disabilities. So the monthly income limit is $5,467. And then you'll see the asset limits, and these don't change, but these two numbers and the limit for the couple, which is 10,934, will change yearly. So go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah.
Some of the issues that we saw with the original working people language, again, Laura mentioned that it was only in proviso, it was not codified into law. So we're going to talk about that in a minute of how we have helped advocate for that to come into codification. But just some things, and I would be curious in the chat if anybody has worked with somebody on the Working People program, or if you are on the program yourself, would love to hear maybe some issues or even positive experiences that you've had with the program, because I think we're quick to always tell what the problems are, but we never actually talk about the success and how it's helped change our lives. So we would love to see that in the chat if you have any consumers or if you are a consumer that has benefited from the program. But just some things that we have heard from other advocates at other agencies, as well as for Laura and I ourselves. They did post the materials on the ACA website, but they are outdated and really don't give a lot of information. It's just a brochure and a fact sheet. There was nothing on how to register for the program, how you are enrolled in the program, who to contact at ACA. And so because of that, DCF and ACA staff were very uneducated about the program. And many people who are or unaware of the program that work there, there are zero requirements for the agencies to educate the waiver recipients of their options, such as the Working People program. Waiver support coordinators and other case managers are often not aware of the program and are not educating their clients on their financial independence if they would like to earn additional income. Those that are aware are responsible for educating the DCF staff. I think Laura and I can probably list about multiple hours on two hands of the amount of time that we've had to sit on the phone with staff at DCF as we're going through Medicaid re-eligibility, of saying we actually are eligible for Medicaid because we are on the Working People with Disabilities program. And they don't know anything about it. So they just send you to another person who sends you to another person who sends you to another person. And eventually you just get hung up on because you've been on the phone for 3 hours and they don't have time for you. And so it is exhausting for advocates to have to explain this, or if you're a support coordinator or a case manager, to have to advocate on behalf of your consumer to people in their own agency that don't understand how this works. And for a lot of us that have to go through yearly Medicaid renewal, it's the same issue tripping us up every year. So if there was education on this program, we would not be getting dropped from our Medicaid because they would actually know how to properly classify people in the computer under the Working People Code. And
Yeah.
because of that, many individuals have been disenrolled anyways, because of that discrepancy. Laura, do you
And
want to add anything?
I will add to that two things. The staff that does know at DCF that does know about the program, when you can get to them, has been wonderful and life-saving. At least for me. But as Sarah mentioned, there are specialized codes that you have to have for it. And I was told, and this is, we'll get into it, some of the issues that are hopefully going to be fixed. And I know others that were told that actually because of COVID and when the program was put into proviso, the codes actually were not updated properly. So they were playing catch up, essentially. And so there should have been something in the system to flag. There was nothing in the system to flag, which is one of the problems. But yeah, very many hours spent on the phone with DCF. Was that all you had to add here, Sarah?
Yes. I will just add one other thing. There's also been questions just in previous conversations with other advocates of, if I don't even hit the income limit, can I still benefit from this program? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, even if your assets or you need to save for retirement, even if you're not hitting that $5,000 threshold per month, you can still benefit from the Working People Program.
Absolutely. So, what has changed in the 2026 codification? First of all, well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's talk a little bit about the 2026 codification in and of itself. It was sponsored by Representative Tant and Senator Bradley, and the former Senator Bradley also had a lot to do with the proviso language, correct, Sarah, in
Yes.
2018. But it was moved through the legislature as HB 915 and Senate Bill 1016, and then passed as HB 916 in 2026 during the legislative session. It has not been presented to the governor yet, although we don't expect any issues with him signing it when it is. So the expectation is that this will go into effect July 1st. And there are a few different provisions that it adds in addition to the proviso. So kind of everything that we talked about in the proviso is already there. The income limits, the ability to get onto the program, the ability to use trust, all of that stays the same. It does a couple of other really good things though. There's going to be a dedicated staff member at DCF to handle issues with working peoples. So that will hopefully cut down on some of the issues that Sarah and I were talking about just a few minutes ago, in which DCF staff doesn't know about the program. And so even if you get a staff member who doesn't know about the program, there will be a specific staff member, sort of like an ombudsman, who you can go to and say, I'm on the Working Persons with Disabilities Program, and they can put you in touch with the specific individual. It also is a requirement that all eligible adults are informed of the program upon waiver enrollment. So when you're first enrolled onto the waiver and yearly thereafter. So where we were talking about a lot of people not knowing about the program, they will actually get a notice from ADCA that explains their ability to utilize the program and all the requirements that we're discussing, including information about the trusts and how to use those, the updated income limits, everything coming directly from ACA. Also, eligibility is now automatic for everybody, for every eligible adult. So that means that when you are on the waiver, even if you're not working at the time, you start working, and as Sarah said, you don't have to reach that $5,000 a month limit. You're working even part time. You are now eligible to not only earn the higher asset limits, but also the higher savings limits, and so that will automatically be applied to you. You will have to. It does still. It's predicated on the fact that you're working. So if Sarah or I were to lose our jobs, eligibility, unfortunately, as it is right now, would end immediately. But as long as you are working, you are eligible.
And something I want to, before we go into the grassroots advocacy, a lot of panic has ensured around that of if you lose your job, what happens? And Laura's going to kind of talk about that at the end of the gaps that we still see. But Laura,
Yes.
you brought up a really good point earlier about like, what do I do with my retirement money if we were to lose our jobs and become disenrolled from Medicaid? That's what ABLE accounts are for. I don't know if John is here today, but John Finch with ABLE United is a great resource, and you can now put up to $100,000 in an ABLE account. So if you were, oh, there he is. John is here. So if you were to lose asset or not be covered by that $2,000 asset limit, an ABLE account is a great resource to have to help keep your protection of Medicaid.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going into the power of grassroots advocacy, sort of how the bills that Laura just talked about came into fruition. Representative Tant actually approached a group of us. Some are from the ARC. John Finch was also a part of this work group. I think John actually got the original phone call from Representative Tant this past summer. Her son Jeremy has a developmental disability and basically called John after she had contacted multiple lawyers saying Jeremy's working. He's somehow now enrolled in the FRS retirement account and he's getting retirement. It's going to kick him off his Medicaid waiver that we finally for years have been trying to get him enrolled in. What do we do? And so John told her about the Working People program and she had no idea what it was. And so really it was her idea to make sure that this program that we had in proviso was now put into law, which was much overdue and needed. And so when she collaborated with, several stakeholders, including Laura and I, we kind of talked about all of the gaps in our personal experiences and how we could create bill language to cover those gaps and also for people like Jeremy. And so this is a picture of Laura and I, along with her name is Lily. She works for our Center for Independent Living in Miami. And this, I think, was right after it passed the Senate, the last
Yes.
Senate committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was the last Senate committee. And yeah, and just on that note too, out of those conversations with Rep Tant is kind of and then later Senator Bradley's how the automatic enrollment piece came about and just some of the other provisions. So I think just when we're thinking about the power of grassroots advocacy, it's really this collective thing, right? Like you have Representative Tant who didn't even know about this program. You have, Sarah and I and others that were utilizing the program. You have others that were, so it was kind of this several pronged approach where our experiences, Tant's experience first and foremost, could help inform improvements. And I think that is just so powerful and something I want to highlight because it's not only true of this bill, but it's true of anything that, we as people with disabilities or as loved ones of people with disabilities, just that power of your story and just the improvements that can be made. And I think that, what happened with Jeremy and Rep Tant is the perfect example of why sometimes that experience is needed, because had she not had that personal experience, this, probably might not have come to fruition, you know, even though Sarah and I know that these problems exist, a lot of people know that these problems exist. So, um, you know, while Rep Tant did luckily have, luckily or unluckily for her, I don't know if she would take issue with me calling it lucky. Luckily for us, had this experience, and that inspired that bill. I think it's also just speaks to the power of needing to talk to your legislators and stay connected with them and share stories, because some of them don't have those experiences, so they rely on us as constituents to kind of bring those experiences forth.
Yeah, that's a great point, Laura. Okay, next slide. So these are just some photos of Laura and I. I wish we had more photos of other advocates because, well, I think there is one on the next slide, but in each committee, there was a lot of advocates that came to either wave in support or testify on the House and the Senate bill. When the bill got to each of the chambers, so the House floor and the Senate floor, both chambers, it passed unanimously, which is huge. I think very rarely I see a bill pass like 119 to 0 or 40 to 0, which really showed the bipartisan support and the power of just the advocate support for this legislation and the hard work that so many advocates did to pull this off. The passage of House Bill 915 in the last House committee actually passed on Developmental Disability Day at the Capitol. And I've been doing advocacy work for, gosh, 10, 15 years now. And this was probably one of the most special days that I could like get emotional. It was just such a special experience to be able to see so many people in wheelchairs and in walkers that often don't have a voice to be able to share. Like our voices have been minimized so often by society. And for us to be able to be in a coalition together and show up in power of numbers to show support of a bill was just such an incredible and empowering experience. So I think there was like 23 waving and supports, and the poor lady in the administration that had to read all of the waving and support forms was like out of breath. So this is just a picture of only some of the advocates that were in the room that day, showing their voices, and I know that that meant so much to Representative Tant for the final passage of her bill in the House to be able to have that support of her community.
Yeah, and even other committees too. There was a lot of support, which I think, I mean, I sadly wasn't there that particular day, but I think hearing you say that when they're reading the forms, that doesn't happen very often for those of you that may not, like, they don't get out of breath. So I think that's a powerful thing to know that all our voices came together to, along with Rep Tant, who herself, her own experiences and those of Jeremy, like that was just uplifted. It's amazing. And it also passed the full House floor unanimously, or the full Senate, or the full legislate, you said that. I'm just repeating what you said, but it passed both chambers unanimously, as Sarah said. So that does, again, I agree, doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, this is like the power of grassroots advocacy.
Which, clearly, like, I'm so stunned that I was repeating what you said, but it really is something to be celebrated. But as we like to say at DRF, not to be pessimistic, but we're kind of always looking to the work that's left undone. There's always more, unfortunately, or fortunately, there's always in disability advocacy more work left to be done. So what are some of the gaps present in the current legislation? And feel free to jump in with this too, Sarah, but we did identify a big one in that the ability to you are only eligible for the program. The ability to stay eligible for the program depends upon employment. And that is a gap just because things happen. And so something like even a 6 month ability to stay covered could be the difference between, um, for many people, really life saving or life altering care ending immediately, versus, having that time to figure out what you're doing, having that time to figure out, if you're going to be able to stay enrolled on the program or not, versus the immediate disenrollment the next month. Although, as Sarah mentioned, there are a couple of other avenues as far as the money, and the asset limits, that you could take advantage of. So definitely look into able accounts, but for sure, it's, at least for me, and maybe I'm just anxiety prone, but I think for you too, Sarah, like, there's always that worrying in the back of your head if something happens that, my coverage depends on employment. Um, Also, I think another gap that I would want to highlight is, and this is really more of a kind of rulemaking and DCF process than it is something in a bill, but one of the issues that we saw, um, in making it difficult to let people know about working peoples, as well as the legislature to know how well it's working, is that DCF has not been tracking the program's usage at all. So, I know that I have asked several individuals, even at DCF, for those numbers. I think Rep Tant requested them, um, and they don't have the full picture of who is using the program, and that is important when we look towards future advocacy and future developments in the program, to be able to show, hey, this is working, and also let's get more people involved in this, as well as, I've kind of been told personally, oh, it's such a small number of people. Well, it could be a small number of people that it applies to, or it could be a rather large number. Nobody really knows. So that's kind of a guess and a gamble. But overall, one of the biggest gaps is that it doesn't cover as many people as there are people with disabilities. So we are very lucky, and I don't want to understate the fact that this program, as it is existing, is working, and really vital to a lot of us. We are very grateful for that. But there are a lot of people with disabilities that aren't covered by the waivers. They either have, different disabilities that aren't covered by the waiver, or they're on waiting lists. So there is a large amount of people with disabilities that could work, and take advantage of things like the Working People's Program, that can't, just because of how the program itself is set up. And so, as Sarah mentioned earlier, the impetus for this, or the kind of start of it, was a Medicaid buy-in program, which now, Sarah mentioned 45 states. Actually, now 47 states have buy-in programs. And in the intervening years, there's a couple more that have been added. So Florida is one of 3 states that doesn't have the ability for anybody that relies upon Medicaid for these services to work. And so that is something that we are always pushing for, is more people to be included in the program. And we kind of see working people's, or I'll see, I won't speak for you, Sarah, but I see working people's as the kind of pivot point for further explorations into people with disabilities and their ability to join the workforce. We definitely want this to be more of an open tent than it is. And so, that's a continued fight. It's not something that's going to happen next session. It's not something that's probably going to happen for a while, but that is kind of the long range view and how we see it. And so, the opportunities for future advocacy are kind of how we get there. Um, can we, as more people utilize the program, identify even more gaps than Sarah and I and others that we know the program that have used the program up until now? Like, are there gaps that we can fill in? I'm sure that there are. Um, I'm positive that there are. And also, can more people utilize the program? Can we start with things like allowing those on the waiting list for the waivers to utilize the program? We talk about um, the waiting list being astronomical. And so what difference would it make to individuals that as they're waiting for services, and especially as a lot of them coming into that youth and transition age, what difference would it be for, an 18-year-old, unlike Sarah and I, to know, like, hey, I can work, I can go to college, I can pursue a master's degree, and that's going to be fruitful for me. So that would be huge. And I think those are some of the things that, at least from my perspective, from a DR perspective, and I'll let Sarah weigh in, that we're looking for folks to continue to advocate with us. This is a very open table. Advocacy only works when we're all kind of present. And so this isn't just, Rep Tant working on this and just this group of advocates. We want more and more people that are invested in these issues to work to bring their ideas, to bring, energy. Sarah and I, Rep Tant, even, none of us have all the answers. And so we need the community for legislation and future advocacy like this.
Yeah, Laura, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'll just say two quick things just because I know I want to leave time for questions. But I think when we started this process, I remember, the group of advocates from the DD Council that we were all working on this, and it was kind of like a go big or go home. We wanted to like reach for the stars and get all the things that Laura had mentioned in one piece of legislation. And that kind of humbled me and humbled a lot of advocates to realize that like Rome is not built in a day. Like this is going to be an ongoing process. And so I know there is a lot of frustration in the disability community of why is my disability not included in this? Why or can I not enroll in the working people program? We had to kind of take the wins where we could get them, and we had to build slowly. So in our mind, a lot of advocates' minds, this isn't perfect. It's definitely not perfect. There's a lot of room for improvement, and it's neither one of our missions or at least a lot of the agencies that we've worked with in our stakeholder group to just settle here because we really want to be inclusive. And as Laura said, there's just so many things that of having power in numbers. We need advocates, we need support coordinators, case managers. If you have stories, they need to be shared so that we can make this as most inclusive as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just echo that, and then we'll move on to questions. That absolutely is true. The frustration is valid, but we are not looking to end here. We want more people to be able to work and benefit in the ways that this program has benefited us. And hopefully, we will have something eventually that covers every person with a disability in Florida that wants to work. And so now we're gonna kind of open up for questions.
All right, so I think the first question I'm gonna go to right here. So this was from Elkanah. Hopefully I said that correctly. I'm a person with a disability. I have an MSW and I work part-time. If I use this program to earn more income, will it affect my son's benefits or cause him to lose them?
That's a good question, Laura. I'm not a benefits expert. Do you know?
That is not my area of expertise either. I will say that may be a question that, DRF itself might be able to help better look into, and I can put contact and my contact information is also right there, but I can put DRX contact information in the chat, as well as I would contact DCF themselves. I know we had discussed kind of like that they don't know a lot about the program, but as that's changing, maybe they can put you in touch with the person that they have that is going to kind of oversee the program. I wouldn't be comfortable within myself answering that, but it's a really valid question. And I think a lot of that too is like some of these things are just situations that we don't know yet, and we'll figure out as more people utilize the program. But I'm happy to kind of forward that on to or give you DRF's contact information if DRF itself can be helpful.
Okay. Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate you. So the next one was, is there any difference for an individual working with when their fundings are coming from SSI or SSDI or SSD?
Yes. So, and Laura, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but before COVID happened in 2020, I was still enrolled on SSI Medicaid. And then because of my income, I got dropped off of SSI Medicaid and then put onto the Florida Medicaid through DCF. And so that is when I was able to be eligible for the Working People Program, strictly from being on the Florida DCF Medicaid system. Now, if you are on the SSI Medicaid, there is a program called 1619B that does protect your income and based on disability expenses and how much you're earning versus how much waiver dollars you receive. So I think that is more of the income protection under SSI,
Yeah.
but in terms of Florida Medicaid, working people's only through DCF. But Laura, please correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
no, that's absolutely correct. And the 1619B waiver is the limits there are higher again, not a benefits um planner, but I've gone through that myself. And so Sarah's absolutely correct. Like what you might want on that situation is a 1619B, but once you hit that threshold of not being eligible for SSI, that's when that's when the state Medicaid would come into play, and then the eligibility for working people. So that was a great question.
Well, thank you all so much. So the next question is, if you were on a waiver prior to 2019, so you were not automatically enrolled, how can you be added? I guess you have to, like you said, you have to request to be enrolled, right?
That was yeah, well, I guess technically as of today, yes. But hopefully as of July 1st or sooner if the governor signs the new bill into law, no, you would be automatically eligible
Yes.
immediately.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So Kevin oh wait, never mind, not Kevin. The next one is there any difference? Well, we already that was the same question. We already addressed that one. Somebody asked the same question. Let's see. Yep, we'll send this. We'll send resources for this. Let's see. Is it required to call DCF in order to use the program?
Yeah, yes. Right now, yes.
Right now, yes.
Especially if you're going through Medicaid re-eligibility, I highly recommend calling DCF to ensure that chances are you're probably not coded in the computer. That's not been my experience, and I don't think Laura, it's been yours either. And that's where the frustration of having to educate DCF has been of, how do we enroll in this? And they don't even know. But yes, I would highly encourage you to call, especially before you start earning more money, because you do not want to get dropped from if you're on a Medicaid waiver, especially.
And on that note, even when it becomes, I know we just said that it's going to become automatic, which it will, but even when it becomes automatic, I would still recommend, out of an abundance of caution, just based on the experiences that I know that I've had, that Sarah's had, that other calling, because as we know, things move slowly, so it's not going to be just kind of the flip of a switch and everybody's going to know about this program and everything's going to be fine. So just even when the enrollment's automatic, I would call. That would be like best practice to me, is to call and ask.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think you may have covered some of this, but Vivian asked, Is this similar to the ABLE account where the savings won't affect SSI? Also it won't negatively affect MedWaiver or Medicaid? Question mark.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last question so far, Karen asked, is there a specific contact you would recommend to contact to enroll? I've spent hours being bounced between DCF employees.
Same,
Yeah.
Karen. Same.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
Unfortunately.
not unfortunately, not as of right now. That the new law, the new bill that will soon be new law directs them to assign a specific person, but we don't have who that person is or any information about that as of right now. Um, so unfortunately, for the moment, I don't know that I have any better contacts. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any thoughts that
I
are.
don't have a specific name, but where I have found the most luck and not even super helpful, but a little bit more knowledgeable has been the Adult Medicaid Services Department. They specifically oversee the home and community-based waiver. So if you just call the general helpline, which includes things like food stamps, anything, they're going to have no idea what you're talking about or where to send you. And so through many phone calls, I finally ended up at the Adult Medicaid division of DCF when, again, because they oversee the waiver programs. Even then, they weren't super knowledgeable, but at least you were talking to somebody that had knowledge of at least the waivers. So that would be my recommendation to start.
Thank you so much. And thanks, John. I see you in the chat, helping out with some info too.
And I think there's been a lot of questions about like if we could send resources to
Yeah.
links about the program. We can follow up with you, Justin, on what ACA has on their website. As Laura and I mentioned, it is very minimal.
Well, on that note, Sarah, DRF actually, and I'll send this to you, Justin. DRF has a it's not we have a topic on it that's a little bit, hopefully a little bit more helpful.
Okay. I mean, yeah.
Great.
We'll send out an email tomorrow after our once Dina finishes editing the recording from our meeting because we posted on our YouTube page. So whatever information you all send me that I'm allowed to send in that email that you say I'm good to go with, I'll just add it to our email tomorrow with the other resources.
John just hit both of those links in the chat. Thank you,
There you
John.
go.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
everybody in the chat that's asking about resources, there's two very helpful resources right there. Well, w one's more helpful than the other, we think, but
I don't. Maybe I'm biased, but
maybe.
I tend to think DRF's resources are more helpful than Aka's. I guess maybe I shouldn't say that on our recording, but I'll stand by that.
uh, with all love and respect. All right. Well, hey, we appreciate you all joining. Thank you so much. This is a great meeting. We had a lot of participants. Over 130 were on live, so that's incredible. And then there's many more that will request to watch the meeting later. So we appreciate you all. Thank you so much, Laura and Sarah. You both were great. I know we've worked with you before, and I'm sure we'll work with you again on meetings like this. And so we just appreciate you having the time to be able to present for us. And again, thank you all so much for taking your lunch hour to join us in this meeting today. It was very informative, very helpful, and something we all care about. So we appreciate you all very much.
We appreciate you too.
Thank you.
Of course, absolutely. Well, thank you all, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And you take care.
Thank you.
Bye.